You can hear us.
Hey, shack packers. Just a heads up. Steph and I are a little out of step with our recording schedule at the moment, but rather than leave the shack empty, we've conjured up something a little different for you. We started a new little side series called True Tales from the Shack. These are bite-sized episodes that dive into true, unusual, creepy and unexplained tales and odd myths and folklore from around the world. You'll hear these now and then when Steph and I can't get to record together. But don't worry, we'll be back together again very soon. So for now, pull up a seat, grab your favourite brew and swing that light and enjoy this creepy little true tale from the shack. Times of turmoil, endings rarely stay buried. Tonight's story is about a woman who aided the living whilst choosing to recognise her connection to spirit. The place is Silvertown, East London, in the early 1940s. A place where the air never seemed fresh, never clean. By day, the Tate Lyle Sugar Refinery exhaled its sweetness, thick, golden, almost comforting. But by night, the air held the sweetness while turning heavy, sticky, and clinging to the lungs. Leonard Street sat within its shadow, between factory and docks, close enough that sash windows rattled when the factory machinery switched on, close enough that the fine sugar dust sometimes drifted through the cracks, settling like pale ash across the furniture. And in wartime, 1941, that dust became something else entirely. Because when sugar gets hot, when it burns, it explodes. Jess Smith wasn't just a housewife, she was also Sergeant Jessie Smith, ARP warden. And that meant something. She'd earned those stripes. And together, with her tin helmet, whistle and clipboard, she had an air of authority carved out of the chaos of war. She led her sector, Leonard Street and the surrounding area in Silvertown, which included the overbearing sugar factory that could be seen as soon as she opened the front door. Her duties included blackout enforcement, bomb sweeps, casualty checks, amongst others. Men twice her size took her orders without question. Because when things went wrong, Jess didn't freeze. She felt. She listened. To buildings, to silence, to things that others ignored, and more than once that had saved lives. "The gas main's gone," she hissed urgently towards a colleague before anyone else had smelt it. "Get 'em out, now!" They did, and seconds later the street ignited. After that, no one doubted her. But they didn't ask how she knew. That night, the warehouse took a hit. It wasn't just another bombing, it was far worse. An incendiary cluster was dropped straight onto one of the Tate Lyle storage buildings. A warehouse packed with raw sugar sacks, timber beams and dust-thick air. At first it smouldered, and workers thought they could contain it, but the heat built and sugar dust lifted into the air, fine and practically invisible, until the entire space became a complete powder keg. And then it went. It didn't sound like a fire. It sounded as though the sky itself had cracked open. A deep, convulsive whomp that punched through windows in the streets close to Leonard Street. Flames rolled out in a golden wave, burning not red but amber, thick, syrupy and clinging. The people inside didn't just burn, they vanished completely in the molten amber light. She was off duty at home when the sound came and glass broke in through the upstairs windows. "I think one of the warehouses has been hit, Jess," Fred said. He jumped up, frantically. Jess lowered her head, her hand on the table, feeling it. A faint tremor, not from the impact, that was far too obvious, but from something that felt unsettled. "Do you smell that, Fred?" she said. Fred sniffed. "Smoke?" Jess shook her head slowly. "No." Her voice dropped. "It's sweet. It's burnt sugar." And that's when things began to shift, a vibration deep within her soul, in time itself. The unlit kettle didn't just boil, it split the air. A shrill, furious whistle sliced through the essence of life itself before going dead, silent, mid-tone. The happy family holiday photograph on the wall didn't just tilt, it fell face down hard. And when Jess turned and lifted it, the glass in the picture felt warm. Sometime later, Jess stood at the sink, her hands in the water still, because she could sense that awareness again, that unease and the weight it carried, and slowly she looked up. Her reflection in the window in front of her didn't flicker, it held, and she saw a figure stood behind her. Not a shadow, not a suggestion, but a man. His clothes darkened, the edges wrong, and his face, God, his face scorched like it had been half remembered by fire. As she watched, his features softened, blurred like sugar melting. His charred mouth moved, but the sound came from somewhere else.
"I didn't run."
Jess spun round towards the man, but the room gave nothing back, just a hollow emptiness. Yet the room felt warmer now. Much too warm. Jess walked her sector that night like she always did, her shoulders squared, her torch ready. "Put that light out!" she snapped at one door. "Do you want to light us up for the Luftwaffe?" The blackout curtain shut instantly. Normal, routine, control, until... Her whistle, she lifted it to her lips. However, she didn't blow it. Hesitating, listening, time held her in place. The sound grew, an unbreakable rhythm, the march of war itself, dozens of unseen shadows, an entire column of shadowed soldiers rhythmically advancing right behind her. For a second time today, Jess spun round, her torch beam cutting through the dark, empty street. The sound persisted without pause. She quietly, respectfully stepped aside, and the column of men passed her and carried on, threading through the darkness, continuing even after it should have stopped. Jess lingered in that moment as though time had thinned around her. The refinery warehouse itself wasn't just wreckage, it was fused. Sugar had melted, flowed and hardened again, trapping beams, tools, equipment and people, neighbours, friends. Some weren't even whole, some not even visible, just shapes beneath the amber glass. Jess stood there anyway. She called out, and she listened, and eventually they answered. Not one voice, but many, layered, overlapping. A man begging someone to tell his wife, a boy crying for his mum, a woman whispering prayers that didn't belong to her anymore. Jess gasped and staggered slightly because these voices weren't coming from the ruins or the rubble. They were there, actually inside her head. And then silence. Total silence, as if something had realised that she could hear them. Then within the silence a young girl appeared. Her dress wasn't torn, it was stuck as if glued, edges stiff and glossy, like it had been dipped in syrup and left to harden. Her eyes were a little too clear, too present.
"You can hear us,"
she said, not asking exactly, just knowing. Jess swallowed, nodded. Yes. The girl tilted her head, and behind her more shapes began to form, not stepping forward exactly, but gathering. Jess visited her sister the next day, not out of routine, out of urgency. "You've heard them again, haven't you?" Jess said. Her sister didn't answer, just nodded, her eyes hollow. It's not just footsteps, Jess, anymore," she whispered. "Show me," Jess said kindly. They climbed the hall stairs together, and partway up, the temperature dropped sharply. Jess exhaled and saw the condensation of her breath. Almost immediately, a step creaked above them. Not imagined, not subtle, a full weight. Waiting. Jess didn't hesitate. "Go on," she said gently. "He's here." Her sister climbed, terrified, but her feet climbed slowly on and up each stair. On reaching a particular stair, they both heard the unmistakable sound of boots, as if someone was stepping aside, as if to let her pass. "Keep going," Jess assured her. On reaching the top, her sister turned, looking back down the stairs, and gasped. Jess didn't see him clearly, but she felt him. A presence that wasn't fractured and wasn't lost, just waiting for closure. "Missing in action, presumed dead," the formal, stark telegram had said. Jess's sister looked down those stairs and into the eyes of her son. His slightly transparent form stood wearing his boots, in full uniform, looking up at his mother. "Tell him," Jess encouraged, and her sister spoke the words Jess had suggested. "I know you're here, son. I love you." She looked towards Jess, who smiled with encouragement. Looking back at her son, she whispered, "I'll never forget you." The entire house seemed to exhale as her son smiled, his presence lingering, and then simply he wasn't there. The relief was real, palpable. Jess closed her eyes because now she knew not all of them were trapped, but some definitely were. Back at home, it didn't build slowly anymore. It arrived with a fanfare. Footsteps at all hours, doors opening and then closing softly. No violence, no anger, just constant. Voices, no longer whispers. They overlapped, they spoke over one another, they pressed, urgent. Jess was unable to sleep and stood in the hallway one night and finally said, quite firmly, "Stop it. Just one at a time, please." For a moment, all went quiet. And from the thinning silence, a single voice came through, clear, grateful, and patient. The others stood back, allowing each voice its final moment. By mid-June in 1944, as Jess was growing more accustomed to the voices that brushed against her, She found herself craving something simpler, something solid. Time with Iris, her daughter, her rapidly growing daughter, 13 years old now and finally home again after years of evacuation. The heavy bombing had eased in the lead up to what people were calling D-Day, and for the first time in years, Jess allowed herself to hope for a stretch of ordinary mother and daughter time. The living room felt almost peaceful that afternoon. Sunlight poured through the back window, warm and honey soft, catching the dust motes as they drifted like tiny drifting spirits. The wireless was off. Their lunch plates still sat at the table, crumbs of bread and a smear of precious jam left behind like evidence of a small stolen happiness. Iris sat at the table browsing through an old magazine at hairstyles, dreaming of becoming a hairdresser when this war was over and she left school. Jess watched her with that quiet, aching gratitude that only wartime mothers knew, the kind that lived in the chest like a bruise. For that moment, the world was quiet, felt safe. And just when the world felt safe, came a sound. And with it, the knowing. The drone began. Low at first, a distant insect-like growl threading through the summer air. Jess froze. Every nerve in her body tightened as if someone had pulled a string through her spine. The sunlight suddenly felt too bright, too fragile. The room seemed to hold its breath. The sound grew louder, thicker, mechanical, unmistakable. A doodle-bug. Jess's heart slammed against her ribs. She knew that sound. Everybody did. The V1 rocket didn't glide like planes. They buzzed, angry and uneven, like something barely held together. Iris looked up, eyes wide. "Mum?" Jess opened her mouth to speak, to reassure, to lie, to do anything, but the engine cut out. Just stopped. Silence dropped like a blade. The kind of silence that meant death was falling. Jess and Iris collided together, both of them pulling each other tight. Jess's instinct roared through her as they held each other. Because if they were bloody well going to die today, then they'd both go together. The air felt thick, electric, as if the world itself were bracing for a heartbeat. One long, suspended heartbeat. They waited. Jess could hear nothing but her own pulse and felt Iris's terrified breath against her collarbone. She whispered, "I'm here, love. We're together." And the silence above them as the world held its breath. A second, a heartbeat, then impact. Not a single sound, a collapse of sound, a violent, tearing crack that felt as though the street behind them had been split open. The kind of noise that didn't just reach your ears, but shoved through your ribs and rattled your teeth, shook the air out of your lungs. The windows at the back of the house flexed and then shattered inwards with a sharp, frantic rain of glass. Doors slammed against their frames as if trying to escape their hinges, and the ground gave a short, sickening lurch as Jess continued to hold Iris tight. The sound of bricks clattering, timbers snapping, and a human scream added to the cacophony of chaotic sound. A huge dust cloud rolled across the back gardens in a choking wave, carrying the smell of plaster, smoke, and something darker that Jess was far too familiar with. And in that grey half world, a terrible realisation settled in. It's not our house. Not this time, but it was their street. Their houses where they lived, people Jess knew, voices she recognised, faces she'd only seen yesterday. Jess exhaled shakily, her whole body trembling with the aftershock of fear. She pressed her cheek into Iris's hair, breathing her in, soap, a hint of hairspray, sunshine, and she felt tears pricking her eyes. Because she knew how close it had been. How close it always was. And in the ringing silence that followed, in the distant shouting, in the sudden fragile quiet where neighbours had lived, children had played, and something familiar used to stand, somewhere in the space between her heartbeat and the settling dust, Jess felt it again. But this time, she didn't close her eyes. She looked up, and for a split second she saw something impossible. A rewind. Figures, shadows above them, as if she could see through the house into the sky. A barrier. An almost invisible force bracing against an explosion that diverted. Jess couldn't breathe. Her mind was racing. She didn't ever speak of it, but she also never forgot. With windows boarded up and glass swept that night, the sound of ghostly footsteps returned, louder, heavier, more than before. Jess stood at the end of the hallway, listening, counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Then more and more, far more than she could follow. They stopped momentarily as they passed, and Jess spoke softly, encouragingly, kindly. "You're safe now. Just follow the light," she said. And somehow something shifted, not gone, not resolved, but so much calmer, as if she had accepted a role, a sense of doing what she's supposed to do. Jess smiled. Years later, long after the raids, long after she moved away, surrounded by her grown family, children and grandchildren, living in a cosy bungalow close to the sea, happily retired, with Fred. People who were open, the ones who felt things, who understood a little, would sometimes stop when Jess passed. Not out of fear, not even out of curiosity, but because something in her resonated. A kind of quiet hum beneath the skin, a warmth and a weight, like walking past a doorway where a conversation was still happening, but just out of earshot. Voices that you couldn't quite catch, but sort of knew were there. Some would feel a shiver, some would feel comfort, and some felt recognition, as if they met her somewhere before, in a dream or a moment between waking and sleep. And sometimes in the amber light of an evening, some may have caught a glimpse of her sitting in a window. Jess, still listening, not haunted, simply present. A woman who had learnt to stand between worlds without losing herself, a woman who carried the unheard the way others carried memories, a woman who held the line, gently, steadily, between the living and those waiting to be acknowledged. And if you looked a second longer than you meant to, you might just notice she wasn't alone. Some people leave a place when they die. Jess never did, not because she was bound or trapped, but because she continues to reassure, continues to listen, and continues to wait for the next voice to find her.
That's it for this True Tales from the Shack. One more oddity for the collection and a gentle reminder that reality might not be quite as solid as we think. If you've got a strange story of your own, haunted heirloom, or a theory about what just happened, send it to us at shackpackinbox@gmail.com. Seriously, we love your emails. Don't forget to follow, subscribe, or whisper about us to the local ghosts, whatever helps to spread the word. And until next time, mind the creaks and question the reflections. And if an item you bought at a car boot sale starts humming, maybe don't bring it inside. Take care, Shack Packers, and we'll see you again next week, right here in the shack.